Fully Threaded Radio, episode 137.
Okay, and I'm a medium-sized fastener distributor. I'm not the purchasing department at Apple, but they're, a 1,000-pound gorilla customer. And all of a sudden, so they opened up in Texas, and somebody said to them, try and source all the fasteners here in the United States, okay? So there are 500 fastener manufacturers or 100 fastener manufacturers, and maybe there's 10 who are appropriately sized and interested in that inquiry. How does Apple's purchasing department find them? Do they just send out a blanket email to everybody who's listed in any of the fastener magazines? Or do they wait for the salesman to come in and call on them?
It's time for Fully Threaded Radio.
It is Fully Threaded Radio, voice of the FCH Sourcing Network. Yes, it's another episode of online on-demand fastener talk radio. This is the podcast where we cover the full range of industrial fastener topics, from the very tiny to the very large, as we'll find out today. We're so glad you joined us, everybody. Eric Dudas here with you. And as always, we're joined by the co-host of Fully Threaded. He's lifetime honorary Texan and code slinger extraordinaire, Brian Musker. Hey, Brian. Doing all right?
I'm doing good. I've just come back, actually, from a visit to San Antonio to brush up on my Texan accent. Found that I'm fairly long way away from it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, say Budweiser.
Budweiser.
Did you have a hard time buying a beer lately?
I generally always do, actually, but...
Tell everybody that story.
Oh, yeah, it was actually, it was at a place in Naperville here, and I went and I think I was meeting you there in one of these bars, and I asked for a Budweiser, and the guy did not understand what I said. I'm thinking, okay, how many ways can I say that? And after about 5 attempts, and he still had no idea what I was asking for, I finally had to lean right over the bar and point to the tap.
I love that story.
This is true. This is a true story.
These Chicagoland guys, they don't understand a true Texas accent. That's the problem,
yeah, right? Yeah. I came to that view too. But actually, no, I'm sort of ready, I'm sick of polar vortexes, but I'm ready for really, I guess, the fastener season of shows and things to get going again, really.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are feeling the same way, and that's a little bit about what we'll talk about today on this episode 137 of Fully Threaded Radio. This time we're publishing just a tad late. It's February 15th, 2019. But once again, everyone, thank you so much for clicking in. We actually have a double feature on today's episode, 2 big ones. At the top of the podcast today, we heard a little bit from Andy Cohn. He's an elder statesman of the fastener industry. Many of you know him. He's the head honcho over there at Duncan Bolt, and he's a longtime PacWest and NFDA member as well. He joined us to consider the question, how does a tiny screw reveal why Apple won't be assembling iPhones in the USA? Now, this conversation stemmed from a LinkedIn post recently, and it caused some conversation. We thought it would be great to have Andy come and join us to kick that topic around. The second feature on today's episode is a conversation between Fully Threaded regular contributor Carmen Vertullo as he welcomes Dr. Salim Brahimi. These are 2 preeminent researchers into the field of structural bolting and their failures. It's a little bit of a twist on our usual segment here on the podcast, but I think you're very much going to enjoy it as Carmen takes the reins. Then you'll like this one, Bri, anticipating the trade show season, because Jessica Boweak with Mac Brooks Fastener Fair USA sits in with us. There were some headlines recently about Fastener Fair USA right around the corner in May that you won't want to miss. I think that show's gaining some steam, Bri.
Yep. And it's sort of interesting going to Detroit, actually. I mean, I'm sort of sick of the usual old city, so something different. I know I've never been there, so it's going to be good, I think.
Won't be long.
Yep.
Mike McNulty has the Fastener News Report, and this time he welcomes Baird analyst Quinn Fredrickson to review the recent FDI numbers, and there's a little bit of a headline in that one regarding the forward-looking indicator.
Well, sort of true, but the reality is that there's been, people have sort of been a little nervous about the future for the last few months. So, this is what governs the forward-looking indicator, isn't it?
That's what it's all about. And let's just hope we're not creating some kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy scenario.
Yeah, well, it's probably most likely that's what it is.
Well, Mike and Quinn will kick that around. So it's a full episode, everyone, and we've got a fantastic lineup of sponsors that bring it to you. Brian, please do the honors.
All right. Yeah, we're lucky. We do have a great set of sponsors, and they're good to us, and we hope you'll be good to them. The title sponsors of Fully Threaded Radio are Stellfast and Brighton Best International. Stellfast, for service you deserve and people you trust. And Brighton Best International, tested, tried, and true. Also sponsoring Fully Threaded Radio are Buckeye Fasteners, BTM Manufacturing, Eurolink Fastener Supply Service, InSequel Software, Mack Brooks Fastener Fair USA, ND Industries, Parker Fasteners, Volt Industrial Plastics, The Worth Group, and Solution Industries, home of Solution Man.
Bright, Solution Industries is also the home of Milton Mills, which I'm sure we'll hear more about in the next comic that comes with the forthcoming Link magazine. I wonder if Milton Mills is actually the alter ego of Jim Jordan. Do you know?
Oh, I wouldn't know that. You're the one who lives closer to them. You could ask them that, okay?
I'll have to ask him next time I swing by.
Right.
Well, thanks to all our sponsors. Once again, they truly do bring you Fastener Talk Radio, everyone, and we hope that you'll let them know you appreciate it whenever you get the chance. We also hope you'll reach out to us and let us know what you think of the podcast, what you'd like to hear, what might be useful for you, questions, you name it. The email address, ftr@fullythreaded.com, and we're also on Twitter, where the handle's Fully Threaded. If you're a new Fully Threaded listener, thanks for joining us also. And we're out there on iTunes, so you can subscribe that way. There's an ever-growing number of people that subscribe and listen on their smartphones. I don't think we say that quite enough, Bri.
And if you're not a new member, then tell your friends, any friends you think you might be interested in listening to a podcast that's predominantly about fasteners, hook them up with the podcast.
And who doesn't have a friend like that?
You're right.
Put it on your iPhone. Well, speaking of iPhones, you're not a real big fan of Tim Cook, are you? That's going to come out in this next segment.
Not really. My view is that Apple's sort of lost in the woods at the moment, and it's because they're, since Steve Jobs passed away, there's no one really who's the dreamer or the technology dreamer. Tim Cook's specialty is supply chain management, and he is very, very, very good at that. And he rose up from, an ordinary manager within Apple to the second job to the top just because he's so good at making sure that all the things needed to build a phone or an iPod were in the right place at the right time. And that's his specialty. His famous comment is, inventory is a bit like dairy. If it's not fresh, you got a problem. So, I think that, the fact that Apple is not, I guess is, who knows it? We don't know much about Apple, but it's not as visibly leading as it used to be.
Well, the supply chain aspect is really at the crux of the conversation that we're going to have with Andy. And all I could say is I like my phone, but I'm upset with Apple because of all the shenanigans with the battery. And I take it in there, ask them to put a new battery in. It lasts a very short time. I don't know. I don't think it's a square deal, really. So I like the iPhone, though. Who knows? Maybe Tim Cook will hear this, Brian. We'll change the world with this podcast.
Right. I don't think Tim Cook listens to podcasts. Maybe he does, but not about fasteners, okay? Even predominantly about fasteners.
Yeah, you might be right. Fortunately, there's an army of fastener listeners out there, and, they'll be interested to hear. I got a note here from Matt over there at Parker Fasteners. They've announced that Parker Fasteners has aligned with Advanced Components, the well-known master distributor, and both companies are relying on their strengths, Parker's being manufacturing quality socket drive screws and alloy stainless and A286, in advanced components and distributing packaged products to distributors globally.
Yep.
So together, they're going to forge the future, Bri.
Good. We like it when our sponsors and friends get together and members.
Yes, it's a good thing. Well, why don't you go and get yourself a Budweiser, and I'll grab a coffee. You're still not drinking coffee, right, Bri?
Well, I do, but I'm still struggling through this bloody water. And speaking of that, I got this great email came in from Andy Nagy at Solution after our last episode. He was saying, sorry to hear about the water problem, but he said, over here we call that vodka.
Thanks for that, Andy. Why don't you go grab yourself a Budweiser, Bri, and I'll get a coffee, and we'll be back in just a minute, folks.
Right.
It's Fully Threaded, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Brian and Eric, your online Fastener Talk Radio brothers in thread. Fully Threaded Radio.
When top quality and outstanding service are at the top of your list in fastener suppliers, turn to Stellfast. Since 1976, Stellfast has grown to become an industry-leading importer and manufacturer of the highest quality industrial fasteners, specialty items, and automotive parts. Our array of facilities across North America and in Asia, along with full quality control labs and ISO 9001-2008 certifications, ensure the highest quality parts, and at Stellfast, they're delivered with undisputed service excellence. We're family-run and dedicated to your success. Our customers have come to depend on the expertise of our staff and the quality of our products. We also offer a wide range of secondary services to meet some of the toughest requirements you might have. Contact Stellfast today through our website at www.stellfast.com and put us to work for you. Stellfast. Service you deserve, people you trust.
At Brighton Best, we continue to expand our wide range of products, including stainless steel and metric fasteners. Our family of brands include Preferred, U.S. Anchor, and Ironclad Performance Wear. BBI has been a trusted partner since 1925. With award-winning hand tools, gloves, and drywall screws, BBI is the largest master distributor of fasteners in the USA. Tested, tried, and true. We are Brighton Best. To learn more about Brighton Best, visit brightonbest.com.
Parker Fasteners is your premier cold heading manufacturer, forging the future with precision and quality as our top priority. When you think of domestically produced sockets and tamper-proof screws from alloy and stainless, including A286, think Parker Fasteners. Our lockout line of security fasteners feature high torque, oval center pin design, and unique lobes that provide one-of-a-kind security for your customers. Our in-house 3D printing capability makes the prototyping process fast and affordable, and we're ready to produce your large or small run orders with highly competitive pricing and unbeatable lead times. So, forge the future with Parker Fasteners. Visit Parker Fasteners online today at parkerfasteners.com.
In this economy, I need to cut cost and freight or I'll lose my customer.
Solution Man Ken. The more you order, the more you'll save. With free freight on orders over $1,000. See the Solution Industries website for details at solution.com.
Solution Man, you're my fastener hero.
Just doing my job, ma'am.
SOLUTION, Solution Industries. We are Solution.
Coming to you live from a much larger desk drawer, this is Jake Davis with BTM Manufacturing, and you are listening to my friends Brian and Eric on Fully Threaded Radio.
Brian and Eric, back with you, fighting for truth, justice, and the fastener way of life.
Wow. I feel important now.
Everyone already knew you're important, Bri.
Okay.
And got a note here from Robbie Gilchrist, and he wants everyone to know that it's important that they know that the Gilchrist Foundation is accepting scholarship applications. Hey, everyone, if you haven't heard, the Gilchrist Foundation has it as their mission to give back to the fastener industry. So if you work in the fastener industry, or perhaps you have a son or daughter who's heading off to college in the fall, now's the time to start scrambling those scholarship dollars together, and the Gilchrist Foundation's a great place to do it. The website to get on board with that is gilchristfoundation.com. And I want to point out very quickly that you have to be careful with that name, because there is another Gilchrist Foundation out there with a similar website, but it's a completely different type of foundation. So you'll know it when you get there, because there's a picture of Robbie and the lovely Gina right there on the homepage. And the application's just a click away once you hit that site. So it's gilchristfoundation.com.
It reminds me of when I tried to, it was a long time ago, to get onto the NFDA, and I found the funeral director, National Funeral Directors Association. So be careful of your websites, okay? And remember, also, there's a very, very big difference between fastenersclearinghouse.com, which is us, and fastenerclearinghouse.com, which is some fly-by-night crowd.
Little things make so much difference. Well, that's actually really a good point, Bri, for two reasons. First of all, I remember we had Robbie on the podcast years ago now, and he told us a story where he went to a hotel for a fastener conference and accidentally walked in on the National Funeral Directors Association meeting.
Right.
Which was hilarious. And then regarding the S in fasteners, that's good too, because we always want everyone to remember that we are the people who bring you the FCH Sourcing Network, and that's found at the URL fastenersclearinghouse.com. That's fasteners with an S.
Yeah.
So we're always looking for ways to help the fastener industry when it comes to online inventory searching and sales. We've got a variety of ways that we do that, but our flagship tool is the search engine out there. There's about 1.5 million line items these days, and you're welcome to use that free of charge anytime at fastenersclearinghouse.com.
Right.
So we had an interesting exercise recently, Bri, that we just wound up, and we ran a survey asking users of FCH, why did they come out to the website? And you were heading all that up, and all told, we had well over 1,000 users respond to this. And it was an interesting exercise for several reasons, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, we'll go into the several reasons a little after this. But, you know, what we found out is about 40% of all the people who were visiting FCH were there because they said they had no idea where to get the part from. And another about 30% said that the part was a real oddball part and they thought that we might have it, okay. And, I guess 12% said that their normal supplier was temporarily out of stock. And interesting thing is another reasonably significant portion said that they were searching for a new vendor. So
I believe that. It's a great place to do that.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, heads up, everybody. You got to get your inventory on FCH so that all these users can find what you have.
Right. And the interesting thing is I've no idea where to get this part. That, shows how widely visible our website really is, I guess.
And it also speaks to the breadth of inventory that distributors are asked to provide for their customers. There's usually something always at the fringe, you have to find to complete an order, and that's why people come out to FCH frequently. So again, get your inventory out with us. How you do that's all outlined right on the site, fastenersclearinghouse.com. It's the FCH Sourcing Network. Now, the other reason this survey exercise was so interesting was because we learned a few things about getting people to click on a survey, right? It's not as straightforward as you'd think. I mean, a lot of people just blew right through this thing and just ignored it completely.
Oh, yeah. I mean, considering the users we have, we have thousands of users a day, okay? But it took us a long time to get 1,000 replies or more, okay? So here's the strange thing. So you go to this website and this pop-up turns up, and we sort of worked out where did we want it. We put it a little bit out of the way, but a huge portion of people, the majority, were quite happy to work through using FCH without ever clicking on this thing to make it go away or answer it.
Yeah. Well, surveys are an interesting proposition, but ads are another one. I was talking with Paul Bonini over at Harrison and Bonini. They're specialists in fastening hardware out there on the West Coast. And he's been running a banner ad on FCH for quite a while. And he's got this fantastic deal offering up Elco drill flex and biflex screws. He's doing less than bulk quantities and the prices are blowout. Okay, so he put this banner up and he got a few clicks on it, but compared to how many times the ad was being viewed and the clicks, we were wondering, why doesn't this seem to be matching up? So we redesigned the ad and it's a little bigger now. We're going to watch the subject, but the main point is that web user interface design is a huge thing, and more companies are trying to get a shopping cart system off the ground. Some are doing marginally well. Few are doing it very well. Most are having a hard time, I'd say. It's still something that the industry is learning how to do, right?
Yeah, they're doing marginally well, I think. I mean, some people are doing okay, but it's a problem of how do you attracting the attention of the person who's using your website to either make them understand what you're about. I mean, we would think that most people, a great proportion using our site, have no idea who Fasteners Clearinghouse is. They've just found these items somehow by searching. And, how do you make them think, I wonder who this company is? Well, when you find that out, please tell us, okay?
We'll be talking to Bob Reynolds and Rob Reynolds of InSequel Software on the next episode. And of course, InSequel offers a shopping cart module that lots of distributors are jumping on with. And they've got some experience in what works and what doesn't. We'll cover that a little bit more. But it's a whole topic area unto itself, and it's going to be affecting more and more distributors as time goes on. Hey, one last thing before we get to our conversation with Andy Cohn, everybody. Also got a note here from the NFDA, and it's that time of year again where they're asking the industries to submit applications for the Fastener Professional of the Year. Now, this is going to be the third annual award, and it recognizes individuals who make exceptional contributions to their companies and to the fastener industry at large. You got a few more weeks to get these in. Get out to nfda-fastener.org. If you get to a funeral-looking site, you're on the wrong page.
Right.
And, Bri, perhaps most importantly for some people, self-nomination is allowed.
Wow. So you've done that already, I presume.
Me?
Sorry.
No, yeah, I won't be submitting for myself. I was just thinking. Okay. Well, enough prattle for the moment. Thank you for listening to Fully Threaded Radio, everybody. The title sponsors, of course, are Brighton Best International and Stelfast. Couldn't do it without them.
Right.
But now let's roll this conversation with Andy Cohn all about small screws and iPhones and related stuff. Bri, we used to talk about iPhones quite a bit on this podcast, didn't we?
Well, everyone does, actually. I mean, in business, iPhone's supreme, despite their many problems.
Well, that's true. But what I mean is on the podcast, it was kind of a topic celeb at one point. I mean, we really talked about it a lot. Remember when we were all excited when the smartphone revolution was taking place?
Yeah, well, they stopped being exciting, just became parts of business.
Yeah, you're really not up for having any fun with this, are you? Well, we haven't been talking about them quite as much lately, and the other day I was looking at LinkedIn, and there was a story that caught my attention, and I figured, gee, what a great opportunity to throw it front and center again. Of course, a lot of folks who have been listening to Fully Threaded for a while know that you're a huge Apple-ophile or a big Mac user, and you have been for many years, and you have a long history with that. But iPhone's a little bit of a different story. Anyway, this article really hits on the fastener industry directly, and we figured it would be fun to kick it around a little bit. And to do that, we invited one of our old friends on board, and that person is Andy Cohn. Hey, Andy.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning. How are you?
Great.
Okay.
You're the king of Duncan Bolt out there on the West Coast. We haven't had you on the podcast for a while, so it's good to hear your voice.
Well, I don't know about king, but we are on the West Coast, and it is, it's, what can I say? Everybody's complaining out here. The temperature's 57 degrees. So
Oh, God, that must
There
be
you
terrible.
go.
I'm glad I don't have that.
Suffer through it. I know we discussed this before, so I'll just get right to it. The subject at hand is this post that Mark Shannon of Tower Fasteners made on LinkedIn, and it got quite a bit of feedback and a bunch of likes and everything, which, let's face it, the fastener industry tends to be kind of reticent when it comes to these posts, but this one caught quite a bit of attention. So Mark's original comment was, I found this article to be seriously misleading. Apple manufactures their products in Asia for one reason, and it's bottom line decision, not because of tiny screw issues. So this referenced an article that appeared in the Economic Times, and the author was somebody named Jack Nickus, or Nikes perhaps. And I'm going to read a little bit about that. But you guys both saw this, right?
Yes.
So I'll read just a little bit about this, and then we can discuss it and take a look at some of the comments that it generated. Despite a trade war between the U.S. and China, Apple is unlikely to bring manufacturing closer to home. A tiny screw illustrates why. In 2012, Apple's CEO announced that Apple would make a Mac computer in the United States. But when Apple began making the computer in Austin, Texas, it struggled to find enough screws, according to 3 people who worked on the project. In China, Apple relied on factories that can produce vast quantities of custom screws on short notice. In Texas, where they say everything is bigger, it turned out the screw suppliers were not. And I talked to Baron Yarborough about that one. The screw shortage was one of several problems that postponed sales of the computer for months. And by the time the computer was ready for mass production, Apple had ordered screws from China. The challenges in Texas illustrate problems that Apple would face if it tried to move a significant amount of manufacturing out of China. Apple has found that no country, and certainly not the U.S., can match China's combination of scale, skills, infrastructure, and cost. So that was a condensed version of the article, again, in the Economic Times by Jack Nikes, and Mark Shannon had that comment that this is a misleading story. A lot of people agreed with him. Some people didn't. Andy, you chimed in on that, thus my call to you. And what was your reaction?
Mark Shannon put that article up and said that in his mind, the decision was, well, the article was misleading because Apple was never going to switch that back to the U.S. because the costs are so much less in China. And I was thinking about 30 years ago when the issue was American manufacturers, Fastener, but obviously a lot of other automotive and people like that, were so unresponsive to the market that it allowed fastener distributors to partner with overseas suppliers and come up with faster, better, cheaper answers for people who needed screws. And, you know, they had to overcome the stigma of, oh, you don't want an import screw. But that really changed the market quite a bit in the United States. And I think the reasons were different. It was just literally whether you're in Texas or Los Angeles. I mean, we could outquote an American factory just by, you know, despite the fact that we were sending an inquiry overseas to Japan or Taiwan or wherever, or Korea, and we could get a faster answer, and sometimes is just as good or a faster delivery than the American factories. And that, I think that's what the article was referring to.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, it's not as if Americans can't make these things, these small screws. 'Cause I remember Tom Buddenbone came by our booth at one Fastener show, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. I think he was with Technology Components Southwest then, and he gave me a bag of these minute screws that they were supplying to Nokia to manufacture their phones. So I think, you know, in my view, Tim Cook, his specialty was supply chain logistics. I mean, he rose from a minor person in Apple to vice president simply because he could master the art of getting the cheapest stuff delivered to Apple's factories. And I don't think he bears any interest in trying to supply any stuff in the US at all. He was forced to look at it. But I'm sure these people supplying screws to these iPhones, they're under draconian restrictions, I would think.
But do you think, let me phrase it as a question. What do
Okay.
you think the total, if they sell an iPhone for, I don't know, $500 or $1,000 and it costs them $200 to make it, how
Max.
much are the screws?
Yeah, cents.
5 cents? 10 cents?
Or less, 5, I would think. I mean, there's only
Yeah.
like 5 or 6 screws in the whole thing.
So there's somebody who's like, well, we have to save money on every little piece.
Yeah.
But deep down underneath, it's, hey, we want to change the screw because we just had a problem and we want to change the tolerance and make them a 64th of an inch longer. How long is it going to take you to react to that, Mr. Factory? Holy mackerel. And again, I'm talking 1970s where the American factories, I can't use the word arrogant, but others did, that unless you were Apple, nobody wanted to take your call or your fax. And that's what caused some of the fastener business to migrate to Asia. And subsequently, the Asian, you could have a whole podcast about how was the Asian quality versus the American quality. Well, it depends. If it was the axle on your car, it might have been one answer, and if it was the screw that held the back cover plate on your cell phone, you might have not been as concerned about the quality. But eventually, the Asians got better, and ultimately, in a lot of ways, forced the American fastener manufacturers to get, I don't think better in terms of quality, but better in terms of customer service, responsiveness, realizing that it was more than, you could make the best damn screws in the world. And there were 10 or 20% of the customers who were never going to leave you because they needed the best damn screw in the world. But the other 80% didn't really care as long as the screw was acceptable quality. And the reason they started moving offshore was they were getting better answers, either directly or through distribution, than the American factories. And eventually the American factories woke up, and, well, they either went out of business or they got better.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of them did go out of business. I mean, you're talking about a history that's very well understood by this audience, for sure.
Yeah, I would also say that you're right. Apple couldn't, in my mind, they're very, very concerned about looks. That does not extend to the screws that hold things together, okay? I don't think Tim Cook could care two hoots where they come from as long as it's cheap as possible and he doesn't have to carry any of the cost of inventory.
Yeah, well, Bright, to your point about saying why the screws, there's such a small part of it. I mean, that's the topic of the story. So I think it was put there to make a point. I don't think the author has any vendetta against domestic screw manufacturers. But kind of speaking to that, Steve Duncan, who is the director of contract administration at Indiana Department of Transportation, he commented on the post, "Why do they always blame the fastener?" So, yeah, I think he was kind of speaking to that. And then let's see, Steve Wilson, chairman at Crescent Manufacturing, seemed to agree with Mark Shannon. He says the New York Times article is totally fake news. These screws could easily have been manufactured in the U.S.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah, it looks like that's really kind of it. I mean, there's a lot of manufacturers out there who say, we could have done this and we could have done it cost effectively. And the article seems to contradict that, despite the history that you accurately explained, Andy.
Okay, but, and I'm a medium-sized fastener distributor. I'm not the purchasing department at Apple. But they're, a 1,000-pound gorilla customer. And all of a sudden, okay, so they opened up in Texas, and somebody said to them, try and source all the fasteners here in the United States, okay? So there are 500 fastener manufacturers or 100 fastener manufacturers, and maybe there's 10 who are appropriately sized and interested in that inquiry. How does Apple's purchasing department find them? Do they just send out a blanket email to everybody who's listed in any of the fastener magazines? Or do they wait for the salesman to come in and call on them? I mean, I think Crescent Manufacturing is a wonderful source, and also one of the people that I would probably reach out to for a small screw like that, who meets my qualification of at least you come away with the feeling that you got your fax or your email to the right department, and that they're likely to at least come back and say, well, we can't make it in blah, blah, but we could make it in blah, blah, or wow, this is a nice inquiry. And there are a lot of American manufacturers that over the years gave up that level of customer service. They didn't, okay, there you go, responsive customer service.
Right, but you're assuming that Apple actually wanted to produce or get these in the US. I mean, it could have easily been a question, find out why we can't source these in the US first rather than find out how we can. I mean, by now, Tim Cook, was in charge of all of the supply side stuff for his entire time in Apple until Steve Jobs died, was in charge of building up the suppliers for everything that Apple made everywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And he was very good at it. And he rose from just an ordinary old manager up to the executive vice president just because of that. I think you could have the best supply of screws in America and you would have trouble trying to supply to Apple because it's in their mind not to use in China.
Well, that's the thing that makes me think that, in a sense, this article is off course. I mean, it's great, and it's a great chuckle for everybody. But I think a supply chain manager starts with the assumption that okay, wait a minute, you guys are moving the factory to Texas, but unless there's an exterior cause, unless you've promised the state of Texas or Donald Trump that we're going to do at least 56% or some number domestically, why would I even want to go out and look for a domestic supplier when I have this wonderful supply chain that I've already set up, as you're making reference to?
Right. I think that's that's the answer to it.
There is no assumption, that domestic is better or less expensive, or in a lot of ways, and this goes back to my dad's days, why were the Europeans were in the late 1940s and early 1950s were able to outproduce and produce at much lower cost fasteners than anybody in the United States. And his out and out statement was because all their factories had been bombed, and then eventually they'd been able to order new machinery, which we helped them pay for because we were helping them get back on their feet. So they're trying to quote a part based on a brand new 1952 header, and the guy in the United States is still working off the same, the 1930 version.
Yeah, good point, actually.
Right. Similar kind of advantage was had during the 70s by Japan when they kind of completed their retooling after the war and rebuilt the whole country, literally. Well, this article goes on to discuss a lot of different things. It points to China's competitive advantage in the way of labor costs, and it discusses a few other things. So I didn't summarize the whole thing, just sort of the germane aspect of it germane to Mark's post. But ultimately, it seems to say that despite all of that U.S. manufacturing was not even capable of supplying the parts. And I think that many of the people who are responding to this post were reacting to that aspect of it. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of argument, let's say, of the economics of it. And obviously, that is the bottom line, just like Mark said in his initial post.
I agree completely that the assumption is that the Asian parts are going to be available at a lower cost, and that somebody like an Apple maybe has never woken up to the fact that, I mean, they wouldn't wake up to the fact that they can get their high-tech screw better here as a starting point, because the assumption for the last 30, 40 years, as Brian was making reference, is that it's cheaper in Asia. But if they got in 2 or 3 batches from their supplier in China that were not quite right, or, weren't up to snuff, then they would start looking around and they would find the Crescent Manufacturings and the Cam Cars and the people who really know how to make a good part, and maybe they would have to get sophisticated enough in terms of cost versus quality and where they want, the answer is, the reality is that they'd end up giving somebody here an order for a couple $100,000 and then another $500,000 and then another batch. And then eventually their overseas guy, who was a long-term supplier, would have fixed his quality issue, and they'd switch back and desert the American source.
Probably.
Unless we had a big publicity campaign that said, stay American. And Apple decided, okay, since it made it to the New York Times, we're going to do an advertising campaign that all our screws are domestic.
Right. This is the only way you'd drive that decision. It's got to be something that hurts Apple in its advertising, its marketing department.
Right. Not the purchasing guy, not the guy who's sitting there saying, wait, the supply chain is so much quicker when I get them in, Connecticut than when I get them in Shanghai.
And to be fair, Apple hasn't really manufactured in the US for years. I mean, they had their plant over in Fremont, somewhere around California. I mean, that closed down. I think they stopped. And they manufactured every now and again a very special model in the US, but it was their absolute top-of-the-line model, restricted supply, so they could charge whatever they liked for it anyway. Didn't matter what it cost.
And I make this statement with no prior knowledge, but my gut instinct tells me that plant didn't stay there for that. It stayed there so that there would be somewhere they could fly visiting firemen to that was still in the United States and take them on a tour of the American plant.
Oh no, it was the original plant. Where they moved to after the garage. Their Fremont plant. They just kept getting bigger and bigger. So it was in use for many, many years. But it hasn't. Apple's been making computers for a long time. They just moved overseas because that was where Tim Cook specialised in working out how someone else could take the responsibility for worrying about delivering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And also, don't forget, the air freight on those screws is probably not very much when you divide it out on a per-piece basis.
Right.
Well, there's a lot to the issue, that's for sure. And we all know that there are competitiveness issues, and those are going to remain. No real change on the horizon there, despite guys like Harry Mosier out there promoting such things. I guess I'll just wrap this up with a comment that Tom Buddenbone of EFC made. He said, this is nonsense, as when Nokia and BlackBerry ruled the mobile phone business, I worked with 2 suppliers that ship more than 1.2 million parts each week. So again, coming back to the fact that, yes, U.S. manufacturing is capable, despite what the New York Times article, which was, I don't think I mentioned that it was New York Times, but it was, I guess, republished out there by Economic Times. Anyhow, that was that. Now, what I did notice, guys, is that I never saw any searches go through FCH from Apple looking for these screws at a competitive rate. So I don't know. Tim Cook wasn't out on the site, Brian, in other words.
Yeah, well, I don't really have a drive type of a pentalobe, okay? They wouldn't know how to do a search on FCH.
Yeah, not enough multilobular inventory, perhaps, represented.
No, afraid not.
Well, thanks for putting your comments onto the post and onto this segment, Andy. It's good to speak with you again. I hope we're going to see you out there at the big NFDA PacWest MWFA event coming up soon.
I have the important part is I have the hotel reservation and I have the form here on my desk to fill it out and send it in. So we'll be there.
Good.
Beautiful. So, folks, if you're considering going now, you have yet another reason to be out there. Brian and I will be out there as well. And we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, but I think it's more of to most of your audience, it's more of an ambient temperature issue than it is a get to see either me or you.
That's right. And Carmen Vertullo would agree with you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, we'll be hearing from him a little later in the podcast. Well, thanks once again, Andy. And Brian, we'll talk to you on the other side of the break. Hey, everybody, sit tight. It's Fully Threaded Radio. We'll be back in a minute.
Online Fastener Talk Radio. Hey, at least it kills time on long road trips. Fully Threaded Radio.
At Brighton Best, we continue to expand our wide range of products, including stainless steel and metric fasteners. Our family of brands include Preferred, U.S. Anchor, and Ironclad Performance Wear. BBI has been a trusted partner since 1925. With award-winning hand tools, gloves, and drywall screws, BBI is the largest master distributor of fasteners in the USA. Tested, tried, and true. We are Brighton Best. To learn more about Brighton Best, visit brightonbest.com.
BTM Manufacturing is a domestic ISO 9001 manufacturer of threaded fasteners and bent wire products. From anchor bolts to studs to U-bolts, BTM is committed to making your per print special with the highest quality standards while meeting your on-time delivery schedule. Since BTM began in 1961, this family-owned business has remained focused on providing exceptional service to their customers. Centrally located in Kansas City, Missouri, BTM recently expanded into a 100,000 square foot facility, which allows for the production and manufacture of many projects simultaneously, both large and small quantity. BTM's website at btm-mfg.com allows you to submit custom quotes quickly and easily, and once you do, a BTM team member will contact you as soon as possible to discuss your needs. Are you ready to get started? BTM is. Visit www.btm-mfg.com today.
Hey mates, Brian Muscat. Regardless of the required size, material or finish, Eurolink has the European resources to meet your demands for hard-to-find metric fasteners. We're the one-stop source for all of your metric needs, saving you time and money searching for these parts while fulfilling all of your requirements. How do we do it? Eurolink offers access to more than 100,000 quality C-class parts with the ability to solve your toughest metric fastener supply issues every time. Hard-to-find metric fasteners delivered. Just think of us as your heavy metal rock stars. To learn more about how we can rock your world or request a hassle-free quote online, visit eurolinkfss.com. That's eurolinkfss.com.
This is Baron Yarbrough with Spring Bolt and Nut Manufacturing, the best beard in the business. Sorry, Chris. And you're listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
Brian and Eric, back with you, serving up more fastener talk.
Glad to be of service.
Yes, we are. Hey, there's another guy out there that most of you know who's always glad to be of service. Saw this flyby on LinkedIn and Twitter. Could be out there elsewhere, who knows? George Hunt III, Bry. He's been elected as vice president of the Midwest Fastener Association, our home association.
Good. Well, that'll be good for the association. I have a lot of respect for George, and I think he has his own views, and they're ones I think are very good in how associations should work. So he gets a chance to do that now.
Well, he's taking the Midwest by storm. He was transferred over to Chicagoland a couple years back with Brighton Best International. As most of you know, he's a regional manager over there. Of course, Brighton Best people really are involved in the industry. Everyone knows Rosa is a big part of Wi-Fi. And, of course, Brighton Best is the newest title sponsor of Fully Threaded Radio. We're very much in appreciation of that. And they sponsor all the associations, too. They do a wonderful job.
Right. And I remember talking to Jun a little earlier last year, and he was saying that associations is one of the major places where they can actually communicate with all their customers. They can't do it one by one, or they try, but at a higher level. So they are very in with the idea of associations.
Well, that's why they're there. In this photo, you probably didn't see it since it's social media, Bri. But,
okay. Yeah, I wouldn't see that. No.
We got George here all decked out in Proffered garb. That's their industrial garb, and he looks like he's heading off to a job site, or maybe he's doing an audition for a redux of Village People. Not sure.
Or maybe he's doing a little bit of home remodeling.
That's a possibility, too. We know about his work and home separation and the way he manages things. So, he's probably digging in at home, too. So, congratulations, George, and good for the MWFA.
Yeah.
Of course, Stealthfast is the other title sponsor of Fully Threaded Radio. We're glad to have both of those master distributors on board as sponsors. And another great sponsor of the podcast is and has been Volt Industrial Plastics, Bri. Now, they had a tweet flyby that was also pretty interesting, and it involves a short video, which everyone should go check out. It's on their website, voltplastics.com. And the cool thing is that Joe Voltrauer is shown there hanging out at some of the stations in their manufacturing facility. It's really good.
Cool. Okay. I did not see that by some strange occurrence, but I will go out, okay?
Yes, well, this is the news section of the podcast, so we like to rapid fire those kinds of points out there. And there was another topic that flew by recently, and it involved Fastener Fair USA, which is coming up in May. And here with us to discuss that and all the exciting developments leading up to that, we've got the event manager over there from Matt Brooks. She's Jessica Boweak, and she's been with us before, and she's with us now. Hey, Jessica.
Hey, how are you guys doing today?
We're doing good, thanks.
Good. Thanks for having me.
It's all right.
Welcome back.
Yeah. It's a while.
I know.
You've been doing all kinds of things, and it seems like every time we talk, there's some music hook to it, right?
Yeah.
There is again.
There is again.
You guys have a big party coming up.
We do. We are planning a Motown party this year at our welcome party at the GM Renaissance Center. So we're very excited about that.
Cool.
It'll be the first night on May 22nd of the show.
So Fastener Fair USA, the second go-around, is getting kicked off with a Motown party, and I think that sounds pretty good. And it's also kind of thematic because, of course, last year it was in Cleveland and the Rock Hall was the venue. So this should be a good follow-up.
Absolutely. It was, we had to get a little creative to make sure we followed this one up the same way we did last year with the rock party.
That sounds good. Now, I missed last year. I think something was some reason I had, that's right. We had the Chicago Symphony at the same night. So I don't have any problems this year, okay?
Great. We're glad that you're going to be able to attend.
So am I.
Yeah, has Chicago Symphony announced their spring schedule yet? I hope they have, and this is cool already, Brian. Have they?
Yes.
Good. I'm glad we fit.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, right.
So give us the particulars here, Jessica. It's a great show. It promises to be. And how's it looking so far? I saw there was some stats flying by that you're going to exceed last year in terms of number of exhibitors. Is that right?
Yeah. Right now we have more than 200 companies that are exhibiting, and we're planning to get closer to 300 this year that we'll be showcasing. So we're very excited about the growth there, and to be in Detroit, as you know, is known for the center of automobile industry. We're hoping to grow as well the key buyers to get to over 2,000 attendees. So we're really working towards that this year.
Wow. Okay.
What have you got lined up in terms of your education seminars?
Yeah, this year, which will be new from last year, we have created very high-level education and training. We will have 2 stages, one that will be a distributor conference and another one that will be more on the technical tech talks is what it's called. That will be more for the OEM end users.
So what is the format of the distributors conference? How does that sort of work? I mean, do you have speakers or what?
Yeah, it'll be speakers for both days. So
Okay.
we will have a panel discussion that was really went well last year, and hopefully Eric will be hosting that this year.
Oh, couldn't you find anyone else?
There was no one else available. No, we are excited to have Eric on board to host that.
Yeah, we haven't made the announcement yet, so I guess this is it. So
This is it.
I guess, Brian, you're going to have to man the booth.
God, that's going to be a change for me.
But we will also have other speakers that will be participating as well on the stage throughout the time. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
And then,
I remember last year's one was very well tended, I know.
Yeah, and we really are focusing a lot of, on the distributor side, more on the business side, the marketing side, and how everybody was able to grow and help improve their businesses. So we're really excited about our agenda that's coming along very nicely right now. I also have on the day before we open Fastener 101, Fastener Training Institute will also be participating and doing a pre-show workshop. So they'll be focusing on the automotive industry, a part of their training institute as well.
Oh.
So we're excited to have them back.
Sounds like if you can get there early, it'd be pretty worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Hey, everybody, get out to www.fastenerfair.com/USA for details on this and to register. You don't want to hesitate. Jessica, I think you mentioned something about the hotel spaces filling up fast. What should people know about that?
Yeah, absolutely. When you go to register, make sure that you get your hotels. We've already been notified that 2 of the hotels our room blocks are already full. So please make sure you book them soon so that you're able to get a hotel close to the convention center.
Guess that's a positive sign.
It is.
Yep.
Registration's open and it's going really well. Very strong this year.
Good. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Detroit, I've never been to before, okay? Pretty major city for not to have gone to, but that's the truth. So I'm looking forward to getting to Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit downtown is really nice. They have great restaurants. The hotels are really close to the convention center. So I think you'll be very impressed.
Now, Jessica, there was one piece of news that flew around recently, and I think probably listeners are curious to know. I wonder if you can comment on the acquisition headline that was flying around recently. What's going on with the acquisition of Mack Brooks that you can share with us?
There's not much I can really share. Business is as usual. The transaction is not completed yet, so that's really all I have, just the same information everybody else has. But the good news is for 2019, nothing's changed. It's the same cool team as was last year. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Right on. Well, thanks for all the info, Jessica. Every time you come on the podcast, it seems like there's some kind of music hook, as I was saying, and this time with the Motown connection. Would you say that maybe Smokey Robinson is the equivalent of like Bon Jovi to rock and roll, Smokey Robinson to Motown, or who would you cast in that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think you got a little, Smokey Robinson, you got a little Tina Turner. I mean, you got some really cool music. Marvin Gaye. Yeah, it's going to be a fun party.
It's shaping up that way. That's Fastener Fair USA, everybody, May 22nd and 23rd. Well, it is the news segment, Jessica, and you know what that means. We always like to invite our guests if they would do the honors. Would you care to indulge?
By all means, I'd love to. Now, with the news about screws that you can use, here is Mike McNulty.
Good.
Thanks, Brian and Eric. This is Mike McNulty from Fastener Technology International Magazine, bringing you the Fastener News Report, which is sponsored today by Volt Industrial Plastics, makers of the world's finest plastic fasteners. I am pleased and grateful to be reporting to you this month on a brand new state-of-the-art microphone, a gift from your fully threaded radio host, Eric and Brian. Obviously, you can't see it, but take my word for it. It is one of the better-looking devices in my office, and it is helping me stay focused on fasteners and ready to deliver today's Fastener News Report. In this episode, we will reveal the latest results of the Fastener Distributor Index, also known as the FDI. Also in today's broadcast, we have our top story on the global structural bolts market and newsmaker headlines from Endries, IPC, Motor City Industrial, Solon Manufacturing, Bockers, Grainger, 3 fastener shows, and many other fastener suppliers. On the back page report, we're going to talk about a 30-year-old warning from Ronald Reagan. We'll get to all of that and the latest FDI results right after this.
There's a reason Volt Industrial Plastics is an industry leader in plastic clip, clamp, and custom fastener manufacturing. With over 100 million parts in stock that can be shipped the same day, Volt has some of the fastest lead times in the industry. Volt can do color. We have the capability of molding over 120 different materials and can color match for specific applications. You need it? We can build it. At Volt, we have state-of-the-art technology to build prototypes to customer specs. And although some companies provide similar products, we offer customer service that's second to none, setting us apart from our competition. And now available, Volt's new light-duty cable clamps. With maximum diameters ranging from 3/16 to a ½ inch, these clamps are ideal for hard-to-reach spaces, electronics, and finish work. They prevent corrosion with metal tubing, and with plastic tubing, they won't bind or warp, preventing leaks while maintaining the flow of liquids. Volt Industrial Plastics, the finest, fastest plastic fasteners in the world. Visit us at voltplastics.com.
BTM Manufacturing is a domestic ISO 9001 manufacturer of threaded fasteners and bent wire products. From anchor bolts to studs to U-bolts, BTM is committed to making your per-print special with the highest quality standards while meeting your on-time delivery schedule. Since BTM began in 1961, this family-owned business has remained focused on providing exceptional service to their customers. Centrally located in Kansas City, Missouri, BTM recently expanded into a 100,000 square foot facility, which allows for the production and manufacture of many projects simultaneously, both large and small quantity. BTM's website at btm-mfg.com allows you to submit custom quotes quickly and easily, and once you do, a BTM team member will contact you as soon as possible to discuss your needs. Are you ready to get started? BTM is. Visit www.btm-mfg.com today.
Are you tired of empty promises from software vendors? Are you paying for support that you're not receiving? Is it time for another paid upgrade? There is a solution. InSequel delivers quality software designed for the fastener industry at an affordable price with industry-leading support. Unlike other software companies, with InSequel, you purchase your software once. There will never be a paid upgrade. If you need assistance with anything, InSequel is there to help. When you call, you will always speak with a real person offering you quick and knowledgeable answers to your questions. Can your current provider say this? Quality software, affordable pricing, industry-leading support. Only InSequel can deliver all three. So why settle? Call InSequel Software at 877-446-9775 or visit www.inxsql.com.
You're listening to Mike McNulty's Fastener News Report on Fully Threaded Radio.
The seasonally adjusted FDI reading for January was 56.5, unchanged from the result recorded in December. Fastener Distributor Index data is collected and analyzed by the FCH Sourcing Network and Baird. The FDI seeks to identify demand, pricing, and outlook trends within the American fastener distribution industry. To get some insights on these results, we talked to Quinn Fredrickson, research analyst at Baird. Hi, Quinn. Thanks for joining us on the Fastener News Report.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. So we've got the FDI overall result unchanged. What can you tell us about these results?
Yeah, I'd say, overall definitely signaling, pretty steady trends versus December. As you said, the number being completely unchanged month over month. We did see some modest improvement that was registered in the sales index, although that was offset by some areas that were a little bit weaker. The things that did stand out to us that we thought were interesting were First, just from the pricing standpoint, we saw some moderation on both a month-over-month and year-over-year basis in January. Obviously coming off a year of above average inflation in 2018. And, it seems like definitely for a majority of respondents, pricing is still higher. But, with the moderation that we saw in January, could be a sign that things are maybe tailing off a little bit as we move forward. Although with the caveat, of course, being that the potential 25% tariffs on China were enacted, that could obviously drive some additional inflation here near term. The other thing that we thought was interesting from the FDI data was the inventory levels at respondents. That was certainly seemed to be a little bit more elevated than it had been recently. I think 44% of respondents indicated that their inventories were, too high, which was the most that we had seen dating back to September 2016, and played a pretty big part in why the forward-looking indicator was as weak as we saw it be in January. So,
yeah, I was just going to say the forward-looking indicator seemed to be maybe the big story coming out of this report. As you mentioned, it dropped below the 50-point level for the first time since September of 2016. It dropped down to 49.8. It was 54.5 in December. So, yeah, maybe you want to touch on that. That's the worst recording we've seen for the forward-looking indicator for about almost 30 months. What do you think is driving that?
Yeah, so, specific to this month, as you said, it was certainly the elevated inventory levels. The other thing was our employment index was a bit lower as well. So that was 2 of the 4 components being down that had an impact and brought it down versus, the 54.1 that we had last month. I think, it's also consistent with the fact that, we've been seeing this downward trend in the FLI. Really going back to September of last year, when it went from, being in the high 50s or low 60s type of numbers to, all of a sudden kind of down into the low 50s. But this month being really the point where it was down sub 50, for the first time in over 2 years. So, and I think if you take a look back at what the FDI was doing, back in September 2016 when we did last have one of these contractionary FLI readings, we followed that with basically 4 straight months of, either sub 50 or near 50 FDI readings before growth reaccelerated. And I think the other thing to note too is Fastenal as well was growing, low single digits type of number during that time period versus, the double digit growth that they're putting up right now. So, our opinion it's certainly not a great reading for this month. I think that supports, our outlook that we think that, growth is likely moderating from here. We still feel that growth is likely in 2019 and we're not, facing some sort of, imminent huge drop off, but it certainly does appear that, some deceleration in the rate of growth could be likely going forward.
So not time to panic yet.
No. Yeah.
And you had mentioned the sales number in January was better than December. Do you think that was mostly holiday driven?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that seasonally January is always certainly a better month for people coming off of probably a slow end of the year with the holidays. I think that certainly played a role in it, and we make for some adjustments in that. But yeah, I mean, I think overall it seemed like, even in looking at the comments, people just said January seemed to be a pretty good start to the year.
Right, and I also noticed that the 6-month outlook, even though the forward-looking indicator dropped, that the 6-month outlook was still pretty solid, with 41% expecting higher results, 37% expecting the same, and only 22% thinking that things will be worse in the summer. Does this kind of parallel what you guys are seeing for the rest of the year, for 6 months down the road?
Yeah, certainly. I think that was, also reflected in the comments. I think people, while we had said that, December, the commentary was maybe a little bit more mixed, with some people being positive and some people being negative. I think January, on the balance, was a bit more positive than December. And I think certainly, the prospect of maybe some resolution to the U.S.-China trade dispute is something that, a lot of people have been focused on, and you are hearing some, encouraging signs in the news, but there's still a long way to go before we have some resolution there. But I think that did color some people's response in terms of making some people a little bit more optimistic. And yeah, several people just said, we're confident that, the positive fundamentals are still in place and, uncertain about looking too far ahead.
Yeah, on the uncertainty side, you were talking about the comments. Some of the comments that caught my attention, some were grouped around the tariffs and the president, and then some were grouped around tempered optimism on the economy. I'll just read a couple of these that got my attention. One of them was tariffs from China are affecting increased costs and an influx of incoming materials delaying shipment at the ports. Another person wrote in, we are a distributor who purchases 85% of our products from domestic suppliers. Our suppliers have gotten annoyed with the U.S. wire suppliers, increasing the price of domestic wire simply because of the wire from China now has a tariff. Then somebody said, stay tuned. China and the USA will soon be playing nice again, and Trump will stop playing games in about 6 months, doing whatever he can to help prime the economy for the 2020 election. So what's your take on tariffs and trade? Are things going to normalize in the next few months here they start getting into the cycle for the election?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if you look at what's been said, and, we obviously have this looming March 1st deadline before, these additional tariffs could take effect. But I think there is a real sense when you saw the stock market volatility that we had, at the end of last year. I think it is, having an impact on the market and on businesses' confidence. We've seen some declines in, confidence among CEOs and smaller businesses and consumers. And so I think Trump is certainly aware of that. We do obviously have 2020 election coming up. It's starting to become more and more in consensus that there will be some sort of resolution. And obviously China is motivated as well. Their economy has been cooling, and I think the tariffs have certainly had an effect on that. So, if you have two highly motivated sides on both of that equation, hopefully there can be some sort of resolution. But, I think that still remains to be seen, but it's certainly moving more towards being the consensus that hopefully we can have a resolution there.
Yeah, that would be good. And on the other comments we heard on the optimism, some people said, I think you mentioned a couple of them, but then there was one here. Somebody commented, shipments still good from 2018 orders with scheduled date, even though January marked a bit of a slowdown. And then many quick delivery requests, another increase in the price of steel for January. And finally, I'm confident positive fundamentals are still in place for now. So I think, as you said, things are still cautiously optimistic. And even though we have the bad FLI, I think it should be still good going forward. Now, what are you hearing? Let's wrap up. You mentioned Fastenal, and they're doing well. You said anything else from them and or the stock market? We'll close with that.
Yeah. So Fastenal did report January daily sales last week, and another month of double-digit growth for them. That's now their 20th straight month. They did 13.3% growth, and that was pretty much right what we had expected. And, the organic growth for them was like 14%. And, I think that was really pretty strong, all things considered, especially when the fact that, they cited basically a 1% headwind, from some of the disruption caused by the polar vortex storms. And there was also some noise in terms of the number of selling days. So, pretty solid result for them overall. Our view has been pretty much that we see moderating growth for them as well, consistent with this FLI reading that would imply some moderation in store. We're expecting that volume growth for them will fade a little bit, as the year wears on. But we do anticipate that higher pricing will somewhat offset that. So, those two things kind of offsetting, but still some moderation overall would be our view on what to expect for Fastenal in 2019. And in terms of the stock market more broadly, we've certainly seen a nice recovery from the market bottom on Christmas Eve. I think this year it's up about 9% year to date, and we're up 15% since the market bottomed on Christmas Eve. And I think there's been a lot of positive things supporting that, between pretty solid fourth quarter earnings from the companies that have reported so far, the Fed putting rate hikes on hold, and than the continued strong job numbers that we've seen. The January jobs report was really pretty strong, really beat consensus by quite a lot. So all those things are helping support that recovery, since the Christmas time frame. But I think just as we've said with the FDI and Fastenal, I think there's still enough uncertainties out there that caution is still warranted. While the U.S. economy certainly still seems to be on pretty good footing right now, we've seen some weakness in other countries' economies. There's obviously, as we talked about, the trade concerns that are still out there. And as I mentioned previously, we've seen some confidence dip a little bit among small businesses and consumers. So that's enough that's out there to still warrant some caution. But the market has certainly recovered from the seemingly pretty panic-driven selling that we had to end the year. So, we'll see how the rest of the year shapes up.
The Christmas surprise. So we got Fastenal keep rolling along with double-digit growth numbers, which is incredible, 20 months in a row, and then a double-digit recovery for the stock market. So that's a good way to end the report, I guess, and hope for some good results in February. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for the work that you do on the FDI and helping putting together the reports that are sent out to all the people that participate. So thanks for that, and thanks for joining us again on the Fastener News Report.
Yeah, Mike, thanks again for having me.
That was Quinn Fredrickson. He's a research analyst at Baird. The FDI number for January was 56.5, the same result from the previous month. Visit FDIsurvey.com to participate in the process and get a detailed PDF copy of Baird's monthly analysis. Now for today's top story. According to Amico Research, the global structural bolts market, valued at $650 million in 2017, is expected to reach $950 million by the end of 2025, growing globally at a rate of 4.9%. The three largest regions for structural bolts are China with 40% of the market, North America with 27%, and Europe with 22%. The European structural bolts market size will grow at a rate of 3.7% to nearly $200 million in 2025. North America's structural bolts market will increase 4% per year to a level of about $250 million in 2025, and China will hit a level of $418 million in the same time frame with an annual growth rate of 6%. Next up, today's Fastener Newsmaker headlines. In acquisition and expansion news, Endries International has acquired Industrial Products Company, also known as IPC. Motor City Industrial has acquired Smith Fastener in a partnership with third-generation owner Brian Smith. Wind Supply Incorporated is opening a new regional distribution center in Jacksonville, Florida, and Advanced Components is now a master stocking distributor for Parker Fasteners. In personnel news, Dorman Products reports that Kevin Olson was named president and CEO, succeeding Matthias Barton, who retired at the end of 2018. Brighton Best International welcomes Win Lane to the position of corporate accounts manager on BBI's Ironclad Performance Wear team. And the Hillman Group announced that its president and CEO, Greg Glukowski, was named to the 2019 list of, quote, CEOs who get it, unquote. In 2019 milestone anniversary news, Solon Manufacturing is celebrating 70 years. Ned Schruff is celebrating 125 years, and Bockers is celebrating 100 years amid an expansion that will nearly double its current manufacturing space to more than 66,000 square feet. In awards news, PSM was awarded the 2018 Quality Improvement Award by the Minth Group, and both Grainger and HD Supply were listed by Fortune on its list of the world's most admired companies. In trade show news, Fastener Tech 19 in Rosemont has posted hotel information. IFE 2019 in Las Vegas has announced expanded hours and a move to the month of September. And finally, registration is now open for Fastener Fair USA in Detroit. You can get details on all of these stories and more in Fastener Technology International magazine and the Fastener News Report newsletter, both available online at fastenertech.com. Finally, let's turn to the back page to talk about a warning from Ronald Reagan. After witnessing the repression, carnage, and collapse of many communist and socialist states from the 20th century, it is not only a huge disappointment, but actual comedy bordering on the absurd that it is necessary for the President of the United States to denounce socialism in a State of the Union speech, while in the same week, left-wing politicians release, endorse, and defend the ludicrous, incoherent, and destructive, quote, Green New Deal, unquote. This nonsense is simply the latest and most ridiculous utopian plan of total government control disguised as environmentalism and phony concern for common people. This brings to mind the joke about rabid climate activists being called watermelons, green on the outside but red on the inside. For these activists, it's always about control and deception, which brings me to the 30-year-old warning from Ronald Reagan. In his farewell address to the country, he spoke about the resurgence of national pride during his time in office, and he said that going forward, we needed to have informed patriotism that is grounded in thoughtfulness and knowledge. He then asked if we were doing a good enough job teaching our children what America is and what she represents in the long history of the world. He said that we have to teach history based not on what is fashionable, but what's important, and if we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. In 1988, Ronald Reagan warned us that the eradication of the American memory would result in an erosion of the American spirit. Well, based on the historically illiterate things that we are hearing, not only from people born since then, but from their powerful parents and grandparents, we have obviously failed in the history department. Even though the American story isn't being told properly, I say that it's not too late to fan the flames of the informed patriotism fires that are still burning all over the United States. And if you want to join the fight, then teach responsible love of country to anyone right in front of you. Because as another famous Ronald Reagan warning says, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. This has been Mike McNulty of Fastener Technology International bringing you the Fastener News Report. Please send your news, pictures, comments, corrections, or complaints to me at mcnulty@fastenertech.com.
Up next, Carmen Vertullo speaks with Dr. Salim Brahimi. That's right after the Fastener Training Minute. Also with Carmen Vertullo. Stick around, everybody. It is Fully Threaded. ND Industries has been solving customers' toughest problems through innovative technologies, competitive pricing, and industry-leading service since 1955. A family-owned business, ND Industries manufactures and applies fastener locking, bonding, sealing, masking, and assembling products. Their pre-application process makes fasteners ready to use at the point of assembly, resulting in reduced labor costs, time savings, and superior quality assurance. As a fully integrated company, ND handles all aspects of operations from formulating custom chemical compounds and coating fasteners to providing inline inspection, packaging, and delivery services. ND Industries serves the global market with 13 divisions in the continental U.S. and also facilities in Taiwan, China, and Turkey. Learn more about ND Industries at our website at www.ndindustries.com. ND Industries, innovative technologies, competitive pricing, and industry-leading service. Contact ND today.
Since 1905, Buckeye Fasteners and the Ohio Nut and Bolt Company have been supplying the world with high-quality fasteners. Our standard product lines include weld fasteners, braided weld screws, leg levelers, self-clinching hardware, clevis pins, rivet nuts, and various other fastener lines, allowing us to support virtually all types of industries. We have complete custom manufacturing capabilities in low carbon, medium carbon, and stainless steel materials, and our quality systems are registered to ISO standards. Our on-staff engineering department can assist you with product development and provide total technical support. Our knowledgeable sales team members offer superior customer service and are here to answer any questions you may have regarding our products. Having a hard time finding a part? Let our sourcing specialists do the work for you to locate those items. We offer competitive pricing with typically smaller minimums and shorter lead times. To find out more about Buckeye Fasteners, please call us at 800-437-1689 or on the web at buckeyefasteners.com. Buckeye Fasteners, more than just weld.
I don't have time to look for the best price for a socket head cap screw zinc plated with a patch.
Solution Man can. Let me handle all of your secondary processes, and I'll even ship the finished product. One price, one purchase order, one invoice, and one shipment equals one solution. Visit the Solution Industries website for details at solutionind.com.
Solution Man, you're my primary source for secondary processes.
Good one.
SOLUTION, SOLUTIO. Solution Industries. We are solution.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Carmen Vertullo with the Fastener Training Minute, coming to you from the Fastener Training Institute and AIM Testing Laboratory here in beautiful El Cajon, California. Our topic today has to do with specimen preparation for those of you who like to send fasteners out to test labs to be tested. Here at AIM Test Lab, we receive specimens every day, and I'm not talking about urine samples. I'm talking about fasteners. So these specimens must be properly prepared in order for us to be able to do a good job on conducting the tests and generating timely results for the client. When I return, I will tell you the things that you need to take into consideration when you prepare your specimen for shipment to the Fastener Test Lab.
Thank you, Carmen. This is Joe Morris with the Fastener Training Institute. What an exciting way to start 2019. We have tons of training classes and everybody is signing up. I'm really pleased to see that everyone's fitting in some time for training. If you are in the California area, join us for our product training part 1, 2, and part 3 classes. If you sign up for all 3, you do get to save some money. But these are great classes. You will learn the fundamentals and they are really required for anybody working in our industry. Then in April, on the first week, we will be at the IFI headquarters in Cleveland, Ohio. Join us for Fastener Training Week. This is a week-long seminar. It allows you to sit and take the test for the Certified Fastener Specialist, and it's like summer camp for fastener nerds. You will learn so much regardless of how many years you've been in the fastener industry. We still have our monthly webinars. Join us on the 3rd Friday of every month for great content. This month we have hardness in fasteners, and we just completed self-drilling screws. What I'm really excited about is that FTI now has our online learning library. I know schedules can be tough and it's hard to fit in training, so just log in, pick a webinar and training video that works for your staff, and watch it. You have 2 weeks to view it as many times as you want. We also have some great subscription packages where you can access all of our videos all year long at your disposal. That's all I've got. Thanks, Carmen. Looking forward to more training in 2019.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Carmen Vertullo with the Fastener Training Minute, and today we're talking about the well-prepared fastener test specimen. As you get ready to send your fasteners out to the test lab, you're going to want to make sure of a few things that will guarantee or at least give you the best chance of the expected outcome and a quick and timely report. The first thing is selecting your sample size. Now, you want to be sure that you have enough fasteners to do the job that the lab will need, but not too many, because every fastener must be accounted for at the lab. So choose your fastener sample size according to the specification or standard that is applicable. And if you have any trouble with that, the lab should be able to help you out. Secondly, when you write your purchase order to the fastener lab, be concise but precise about what you need. If there's a specification or standard involved, make sure that you list that. Make sure that you list the type of tests and the number of each test that you need. And once again, if you have any confusion about that, your fastener test lab should be able to help you out. And then as you prepare the sample, as you get it ready to ship, make sure you put it in a good padded envelope if it's a small fastener, or a box if it's large fasteners, or if it's a specimen of raw material or something like that, that it's well protected. Sometimes we receive fasteners at the lab here that are already broken. In other words, they have a fracture surface. And examining that fracture surface is part of the work that we'll be doing. When you have a specimen like that, it's critical that you do not rejoin or do anything to those fracture surfaces that will compromise their integrity. So don't put them together, don't rub them together, don't touch them, don't clean them, don't look at them, don't smell them, sniff them, or do anything at all to them. Put those two fasteners in two separate bags, put those bags in the container so that they do not accost each other on their way to the lab. And then finally, please let the lab know what you expect in terms of a turnaround time. Most labs have a standard turnaround time depending on the test, from a few days to several days. Many labs have overnight service or next day service, and AIM Testing Lab has that type of service, but we need to know what you need. So if you need a quick result, let the lab know, preferably by email or a phone call, so that we know what to expect and we can be prepared to turn your test around in a hurry. Well, that's what you need to know to have a good result in a timely fashion when you send your specimen out to the Fastener Test Lab. This has been Carmen Vertullo with your Fastener Training Minute. Thanks for listening.
Hi, this is Lisa Kleinhandler from Fastener News Desk at FastenerNewsDesk.com, where we bring you all things fascinating. You're listening to Fully Threaded Radio with Eric and Brian.
It's our mission here on Fully Threaded Radio to bring you the top thinkers and leaders of the industry, and this next segment hits that mark perfectly. We're fortunate to have Carmen Vertullo as a regular contributor to the podcast, and this time he's joined by his colleague and mentor, Dr. Salim Brahimi, for a discussion focused on the topic of structural bolt failures. These are two preeminent investigators in the field, so if bolt failure is something you're interested or concerned about, this segment is for you. Now, our connection was a little rocky during the recording session, so the audio gets a bit bubbly in a few places, but it's definitely listenable, and the content is excellent. So I hope you enjoy it. Here's Carmen Vertullo.
Well, thank you, Eric. It's a real honor to get to interview anybody on your show like this, but a particular honor to get to introduce my good friend, Dr. Salim Brahimi, whom I've been working with for, I think, maybe 10 years now, in training programs and a few projects together, and watching him operate in this world where when there's a fastener problem, he rides to the rescue on some of our most serious fastener failures and analysis and investigations that have to be done. Well, welcome, Dr. Brahimi. It's nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Carmen. Thanks for having me on the show.
And Salim is coming to us from Montreal. We struggled to find a time that would work for he and Eric and I, but we found it here on this wonderful Monday afternoon for us after the Super Bowl, which Salim, I found out, did not watch. That's okay. We're not going to hold that against him. Well, I would like to tell you a few things about Salim. Some of them are just facts about his background. Some of them are things that I've learned about him from being his friend and colleague over the years. Well, first off, his primary role right now that I see is he's the Director of Engineering and Technology at the Industrial Fasteners Institute, having taken that over from Joe Greenslade a few years ago. That's a very big role. Prior to that, he was the chairman of the ASTM F16 Technical Committee on Fasteners. I served on that committee with him, and he sort of mentored me through the process of serving on that committee. He received a very prestigious award called the Fred F. Weingruber Award from Committee F16 for his contributions there. He recently received another award called the IFI Soaring Eagle Award for his contributions to fastener technology. He is the chairman of the Research Council on Structural Connections, which is a very important group that deals with structural bolting issues. He serves on the ISO Technical Committee 2 on fasteners. He's the head of the Canadian delegation to ISO Technical Committee 2. And as in that role, he represents the Standards Council of Canada. He, along with myself and some others, is a primary instructor for the Fastener Training Institute's training programs. Most importantly among them are the Certified Fastener Specialist Program, the Hydrogen Embrittlement Training Program, the Automotive Fastener Training Program, and there's another one that I can't think of that he participates in. And so along with that hydrogen embrittlement training program, he brings a wealth of information because he is probably the world's foremost researcher on hydrogen embrittlement in fasteners and hydrogen embrittlement in general, as he directs the research program at McGill University in Montreal. If you don't know about McGill University, that's kind of like the MIT of Canada. He also has his own company. He's the owner and founder of Ibeca Technologies, a fastener consulting firm in Montreal that serves clients throughout the world. He's a licensed member of the Quebec Order of Professional Engineers. He you notice I called him Dr. Brahimi. He received his PhD in materials engineering this past year that he worked very hard on and sacrificed a lot with all this other stuff getting in the way. And he's written numerous articles, specifications, actual ASTM specifications. Some of our most important ones were authored by him. And in particular, he wrote a paper on hydrogen embrittlement in fasteners, which everyone should read. And it is now being made into an ISO technical paper called TR20491. I got that right, I hope. And that will be available for all of us to get through ISO very shortly here. Just some other things I just want to tell you about Salim from my personal time working with him. He gives tirelessly of his time and effort to students and people in the industry. He mentors students there at McGill in the programs that they have there. If there is a fastener crisis on planet Earth or off of planet Earth, I don't know, the International Space Station, and someone needs to go there, Salim Brahimi is the person they send. Top of a bridge, bottom of the ocean, on a dam, on a skyscraper. He's the premier fastener failure investigator that we have. So he really is a national treasure, a global treasure. He knows everybody that is anybody in this business. So if you haven't ever met Salim or had a chance to be in one of his training programs, when you see his name associated with some training, just take that class. You won't regret it at all, and you'll come away knowing a very good friend in the fastener industry. Well, I'm absolutely sure also, because I know Salim well, that he was probably making all kinds of bad faces and scowling as I was telling you all that stuff, because you will never know it from him in a million years. He's very humble, and you can't find out much about this guy from him. So now you know some things about him. And we're going to talk today about a particularly interesting topic, which has to do with coatings on structural bolts. So Salim, before I break into some of those questions, go ahead and tell me anything else that you think we should add about you, or if I got anything wrong there.
Hey, Carmen. That's an amazing introduction. I'd like to meet the person you just introduced. I don't know who that is. But anyway, that's a very kind introduction, and I look forward to answering whatever questions you have.
All right. Well, good. So I learned a while back when you were doing an investigation on a very famous fastener problem on the Bay Bridge in San Francisco, that you were involved in that project long before that problem came about. That's because that's one of the first, if not the first, projects to use A490 structural bolts with a geomet coating on them, or any coating for that matter. And so you did a lot of work to help us get to the point where we could have A490s with any kind of coating. As most structural suppliers and manufacturers know, we can't put hot dip galvanized coatings on A490s per the specification, but we want to solve some corrosion problems. So tell me, what made you decide to get involved in that, and how did it transpire into that particular bolt and coating being used on the Bay Bridge?
Yeah, excellent questions, Carmen. I didn't ask to be involved in it. I was already starting to do my research on hydrogen embrittlement and fasteners, and there are two aspects to it. One is the actual steel material, and the other one is the coatings, both in terms of how the coating is applied to the parts and what happens to the part, to that coated part when it's interacting with the environment. And all those considerations come into play with hydrogen embrittlement, and we had begun our work at McGill on that track. Now, you introduced it very well. There is a historical tradition to apply a metallic coating on A490 bolts. These are structural bolts that have tensile strength between 150 KSI and 174 KSI. And this dates back to the 70s. There was a report that associated some field failures to stress corrosion cracking. And so the committee that was responsible for the A490 bolt standard at the time thought it prudent to forbid the application of any metallic coatings, and really it was targeted to hot dip galvanizing. And until I would say around 2005, that was the 2005, 2006. That was really the reality that we lived in. The problem, as you pointed out, though, is if you're not allowed to put a coating on these A490 bolts, then you have to do something to protect them against corrosion, and that was always a shortfall in our design limitations.
Tell us about Type 3 bolts, which is another way to combat corrosion without a coating.
Sure. So an alternative to putting a metallic coating like a zinc or a zinc flake coating is to use a steel that doesn't corrode as easily as your regular steel. And Type 3 bolts or Type 3 steel is basically that type of material. It contains a variety of different chemicals, but primarily we're talking about a little bit more chromium and maybe a little bit more copper. And what that does is when the steel oxidizes or rusts, it builds an oxide layer that is adherent, so it doesn't slough off as easily. And that protects the steel from further corrosion. So it kind of looks rusty, Type 3 steel. When you look at it, there are some sculptures that are made with Type 3 steel. They just look rusty, but that rust is not progressing because that layer of oxide is kind of protecting the rest of the material. And so you could use that approach with bolts as well. And so Type 3 bolts are essentially that approach.
That reminds me, growing up in Pittsburgh in the 60s and 70s, when they built the United States Steel Building in downtown Pittsburgh, it was made out of this same type of steel. And it was a big rusty building, and they didn't want to paint it. And for a while, everyone thought, oh, that thing is horrible. It's just a big, ugly, rusty stick in the middle of downtown. But it turned out to be quite a charming piece of architecture. So I think that was a cool sort of use of that kind of steel. I noticed as well, when you drive around in California in the mountains and they have guardrails, they're all hot dip galvanized. But when you drive around in the mountains in Colorado, all their guardrails are rusty because they're made out of that same corrosion-resistant steel. It's not corrosion-resistant, as you said. It just doesn't, it corrodes and then stops. And I kind of wonder what goes through an engineer's mind or Department of Transportation's minds when they decide to use that type of Type 3 steel versus hot dip galvanized steel. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, basically you have, that becomes an economical situation, an economical consideration. You look at cost, and using Type 3 steel is more expensive than your regular steel, but it's going to be cheaper than applying an hot dip galvanized coating on the material.
Well, let's go back to when you developed the process or approved or tested for whatever that was, the process that allowed us to use the coated A490s on the Bay Bridge. What were those bolts and what was the coating? And then we eventually were able to write a standard F3125, I think, that specifies what types of coatings we can use on what types of bolts. And we'll roll into that in a minute. But tell us about what kind and how many bolts are in the bridge and how you managed to let them, to convince them or you or whoever that it was okay to put a coating on these bolts.
Yeah, so it wasn't, I didn't invent anything per se. Basically, you had the state of California that wanted to build this bridge, but they wanted to use some form of a coating to protect the bolts, the A490 bolts. In this case, they were metric A490 bolts. So to protect them against corrosion. But because there was no coating permitted by the specification, the state said, okay, well, if you guys can approve of the coating on these A490 bolts, then we'll be happy to use them and include them in our own Caltrans specifications. So really the initiative began with a company at the time, Metal Coatings International, trying to promote the use of their coatings on these A490 bolts to say, hey, we can do this. And they offered a product called Dacromet at the time, which is a zinc aluminum flake coating. As I said, the state said, well, if you can get it into the specs, then we'll use it. But until then, we want to use it. But until you get into the specs, we just don't feel comfortable that it's okay. And at that point, I started working with Metal Coatings International to follow a prescribed methodology to approve a coating on A490 bolts. And that prescribed methodology is IFI standard 144. It was designed to create a roadmap to overcome this interdiction for applying a coating. So it has a whole series of tests that you would do on the coating. Many of those tests are performance tests, like how well does it perform in a salt spray cabinet? What's the torque tension behavior? What's the thread fit? What kind of thicknesses are you getting on the coating, and so on and so forth. But the heart of that requirement is addressing the hydrogen brittlement, particularly stress corrosion cracking. So I did all that testing on A490 bolts that were coated with this coating and did comparisons to other coatings, and then wrote a report. And that report was then presented at the ASTM committee that's responsible. And, with a lot of going back and forth, the committee finally said, okay, the data looks great, we can approve it. And then we had to take the next step of approving it by the Research Council on Structural Connections on the RCSC spec. And that took us still a while longer. But again, the data were there and made a lot of sense. And so once it was approved, Caltrans went ahead and, placed the order for the bolts. And the supplier of the bolts is another good friend of ours, Chad Larson from Lejeune Bolt Company. The Lejeune Bolt Company supplied the large bulk of the bolts on the Bay Bridge. So it was their to have the bolts and coat them and make sure they meet all the standard requirements by Caltrans. And then I was working with the people on the bridge, American Bridge and Lejeune Bolt Company, to develop the tightening specifications for these bolts, because there was no experience in terms of the torque tension behavior of these coated bolts, because the coating was new. So I did a whole bunch of testing there, and then we generated the installation specifications, or validated what Caltrans had in their books. And so, yes, I'd been involved with the project for a number of years prior to the famous issue with the anchor rods. Now, let me, so part of it was with Metal Coatings International that supplied the Dacromate and then the Geomet coatings that went on the bolts. Then afterwards it was with Lejeune, and then with American Bridge.
All right. Well, so back to, I guess not back to, but fast forward after that very successful use of the A490 coated bolts on the Bay Bridge, the anchor rod issue appeared. And those were also high-strength fasteners, not A490s, but A354 grade BD, similar in strength, much larger size, of course. And those had a coating on them, which was hot-dip galvanized. Look back on that, and I wonder if there would have been a way to put Geomet on those instead. Maybe they may or may not have still had the issue. But in any case, you had a big role in that, and a continuing role. And just because maybe everyone has not heard about it, can you give us a nutshell explanation of that and what we can learn from that as fastener suppliers from that particular incident?
Sure. So this is a very different animal from a A490 structural bolt. These were anchor rods, 3-inch in diameter, anywhere from 17 to 25 foot long. And the purpose of these anchor rods was to essentially tension or anchor the bridge deck to the pier to prevent it from moving once it reaches its final resting place. So what ended up happening was a few months, and I think the exact number is 6 months before the bridge was scheduled to open, they transferred the weight of the bridge from the false works that were supporting it to the actual tower that's designed to support it. So the bridge moves, and then they anchored it into place. And there were 96 of these rods in one of the piers that were tensioned to the required tension, which was about 75% of the ultimate tensile strength of these rods. And then within a day, about a third of those had broken, and they only realized this when they noticed the nuts separating from the beveled washers under the bridge deck when they were inspecting. And so there was literally a separation of the nut from the washer that was indicative of the bolts having broken. And then alarm bells started going off. What they did was they were smart to figure out that probably the thing to do right away was to reduce the tension on those bolts. So they reduced them to something like 45% of the ultimate tensile strength, and then the failure stopped. And at that point, I got involved along with a couple of other metallurgists and people from Caltrans to do an initial failure investigation. And in the course of that failure investigation, we generated a first report. A lot of ink was spilled after that, but that first report essentially said something is wrong in terms of the metallurgy and the structure of these bolts. And although they meet the letter of the specification, they're not. They don't meet the intent of the standard in terms of a structure that's homogeneous and properly heat treated. And that condition made those rods especially susceptible to hydrogen damage or stress corrosion cracking. And that was the conclusion of the report, that the bolts were effectively defective, even though they met the letter of the standard. And as I said, a lot of ink was spilled after that because it was such a large, expensive public works project. It became very quickly very political in the state of California and in the Bay Area. So my good friend, Dr. Brian Maroney, who's the chief bridge engineer at Caltrans, was really the one who was under the gun for most of it. And to his credit, they did two things. They couldn't replace these bolts because some of them were in a location that just couldn't be extracted. So they had to design, with the help of the design firm and the contractors, a redundant anchoring system using cables. So it's as if these bolts don't matter anymore, and they had to do that really quickly and implement it and install that alternative anchoring system. But at the same time, Dr. Maroney also wanted to make sure that he knew exactly what the cause was and that he could validate and confirm it with data. So he commissioned a lot of testing that was done both on large, full-size samples of the anchor rods as well as on small specimens. And these were done. The large size testing was done at the pier by the contractors, and the small sample set tests were done at Dr. Lou Raymond's lab in California. But really the end result was the data essentially reflected the initial conclusion, which was that there's a particular lot of these anchor rods that was traceable and manufactured under certain conditions. The heat treatment was done under certain conditions that resulted in subpar material. All the other lots that were manufactured at later dates were fine. And again, all the testing has demonstrated that. All this information is still available in the public domain. Everything that happened in this project was in the public domain. So if somebody's really interested, they can search it through the Bay Bridge site at Caltrans.
That's interesting. You should say that. The state of California does a very nice job of keeping the public informed on these kinds of issues. And if you're willing to sort through it, every meeting has minutes and photographs, and every report, the work Salim had done, and so on, is all available to the public. And I would, if you're interested in that sort of thing, I would really recommend that you look that up. That brings me to another recent piece of information that came my way regarding a different bridge, a very significant bridge as well in New York called the Cuomo Bridge, the Governor Mario Cuomo Bridge, which is just about to open, if it hasn't opened yet, pretty soon. A few years ago, apparently they had an issue where some bolts, A490 bolts, 1-inch diameter A490 bolts, also with a coating, were breaking upon installation. And so recently it came to light that when those bolts would break, they would just throw them in the bay and not pay any attention to it. Well, a whistleblower informed the state officials about this, and it led to a news report, which if you just Google Cuomo Bridge bolt failure, you'll find that news report. NBC in New York did it, and it's very informative. One of the better pieces of news on this type of thing that I've seen, and I think you'll notice for any of you that are in the fastener world, most times when we see reporting on our industry, it's abysmally bad. They don't ask anybody the right questions, and they end up being less than informative. In the case of this report, there was a little bit of that going on, but it turned out they were much, much more concerned about the corruption having to do with what they call corruption, having to do with burying this information than they were with any real technical or safety issues or whether or not the bolts were good or not good. So I was able to look at some of the technical reporting that had been done around that particular instance, and I know you're not that familiar with it. And these things, similarly to the Bay Bridge in San Francisco, this bridge, no one is hurt or killed. We haven't lost a piece of infrastructure over it. So it hardly makes it out of the local news market. These things don't make the national news unless they become real catastrophes. And that hasn't happened in either case, except financially, of course. They're both probably catastrophes. So you won't hear much of this if you don't look locally. But Salim, I read the parts of this report, and so I think there are some lessons for us to learn as fastener suppliers and maybe end users as well. And I thought I would ask you a few questions about the report, which I know you don't have the in front of you and can't access because the state of New York, or assuming this is a state of New York issue, it's the New York Thruway is the owner of this infrastructure. They're not nearly as public with their information as the state of California is. So if you try to Google this, the New York, the bridge is replacing a bridge that was right next to it, kind of similarly to what we did in California, called the Tappan Zee Bridge. And now this Governor Mario Cuomo brand new bridge is in its place. So I got this report, and I could probably take a couple of hours and read it to you, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to read a few things about the background and what it says regarding the testing that was done to affirm that the bridge was safe. So by way of background, and most technical reports start off like this. They will give you something to let you know what the reason for the report is. And it says the steel girders on the New York Tappan Zee Bridge are connected using bolt assemblies at the top and bottom flanges of the web. Web is the wide steel structural portion of any kind of a building or bridge. The bolted connections are slip-critical joints that typically utilize tens of ASTM A490 bolts per connection. There are over 1 million high-strength bolts on the bridge. And then it goes on to say, during bolting operations, 1-inch diameter A490 bolts were discovered broken. Based on a review of the authority inspection reports, the 31 bolts were identified as broken during torquing operations or during subsequent inspections. I'm going to stop there. So these 31 bolts were identified as broken during torquing, or a better word there might be installation or tightening, or during subsequent inspections. So an inspection might include applying torque to the bolt or tightening to the bolt, because that's one way that inspectors affirm that the bolts were properly tightened, as they put a wrench on them. So whether they found broken bolts when they did the inspection visually, or they broke during retightening or checking the tightening, I should say, we don't know. So they think there are 31 broken bolts, and presumably there are more. Some of them ended up on the bottom of the bay. So these bolts range from about 9 inches long in length on the longest length to 5 1/4 on the shortest length, and they are all 1-inch A490s. And there are thousands of each size. And then it goes on with a preliminary failure analysis where it shows 2 bolts. One had broken at the head, and they call that the fracture at the head bolt, and one broke at the threads, fracture at the threads. These were the 2 bolts that were provided for failure analysis, preliminary failure analysis. Both of them, if you're familiar with the way a bolt should look when it breaks, neither one of these look like what a bolt should look like when it breaks. And I'll let Salim tell you what you should be looking for. But they did several things. They did surface hardness testing. They did fracture analysis. They did a metallographic examination. They took toughness measurements, and they did electrochemical potential measurements. Up to this point, they have not identified in the report that the bolts had any kind of a coating on them, although by specification in the contract, they were supposed to be geomet coated, and they were. So we see some hardness testing. All the hardness tests range on the 2 bolts. They did that on the side of the head, 3 measurements per side of the head, so 9 per bolt, and they all are in the 35 to 37 range. So they're very tight and consistent. Lots of stuff on fracture analysis. I'm not going to go into that too much, but essentially they use lots of technical terms that I know Salim loves to hear on the metallurgical examination. And I'm trying to just find one that I wanted to I'm scrolling through this right now that I wanted to bring to your attention. They show some metallographic crack propagation in the threads of the bolt that broke in the threads. But they go on to say, when they talk about the electrochemical potential measurements, they do a coating open circuit potential test. And even though the readings were quite varied, they felt that they were typically what we should expect for a geomet coating versus maybe a hot dip galvanized coating. Now, the report also says that one of these two bolts, and I don't think they say which one, was cadmium plated. I find that really hard to believe. So I can't imagine that a supplier could make an error and provide a cadmium plated bolt instead of in place of a geomet coated bolt. And it's not so surprising that one of these bolts would be cadmium plated, is as that they discovered that in the report through chemical analysis and did not do much with it. What do you think about that, Salim? I mean, if you were working on this project and one of the bolts came up cadmium plated, where would you go with that?
Well, I would say something went wrong with the report, or something went wrong with a wayward part that made it into the system. I'd be very skeptical. Yeah. Don't mean to interrupt, but when I see something like that in a report, and as you pointed out, there's no follow-up to say, this shouldn't be, or no further investigation, no digging into it. Basically, I get very disappointed.
So during the metallographic examination, many photographs, lots of this terminology called fast fracture with quasi-cleavage in various propagation zones are coming up. And then they go on later to say that quasi-cleavage is not a particularly healthy failure, or failure might not be the right word, but fracture mode. But they don't seem to be bothered by it going forward on that. Some really good, I mean, I should get these to you just because they're wonderful training photographs, I think, for someone studying fastener metallurgy. So one of the things that surprised me was, and this is one of the things when we do any kind of a failure investigation, particularly in structural bolting, is we want to start with who the manufacturer was. Let's take a look at some of the manufacturer's test reports. Let's take a look at whether or not the bolts were properly qualified at the job site, which is something that structural bolts, in particular, these bolts are required to have qualified in terms of a test at the job site called a pre-installation verification test. And then also prior to installation, the test called the rotational capacity test, which coated structural bolts are required by the specification and also in most jurisdictions to pass. That would preclude something like the rotational capacity test is a brutal test. First off, we tighten the bolt down and make sure that it achieves its full expected tension. And then we tighten it more, like a half a turn more, or 3/4 of a turn more. These are relatively long bolts, so as much as a full turn more. And some of the transportation department tests go beyond what's required by the ASTM standard. But what that would do is, if they can pass these rotational capacity tests, then you can be assured that a little bit of over tightening is not going to cause a bolt to fail. So no indication in this report whether they checked that whether or not these bolts had a rotational capacity test. And it's not the bolt that's tested, it's the assembly. It's the bolt, the nut, the washer, and most importantly, whatever kind of lubrication might be added to the nut in particular. So in the case of a geomet coated assembly, probably the geomet is as much as you need for lubrication, so there probably would not be subsequent lubrication. But not seeing that in the report, I'm looking for this, and I'm saying, well, that's the first thing I would want to know. Also, of all the photographs of these bolts, nowhere do we see the head of the bolt. So we don't know who manufactured the bolts. We don't see anything about the manufacturer's identification or lot numbers in the report. Maybe they couldn't know a lot number. So to go on, they tested a few more bolts, and then they removed some bolts from the bridge, very few from the bridge, and they had some bolts that were left over that had not been installed. And they did some testing similarly to what we described on those and found no serious problems with any of those bolts. And so they come to the conclusion at the end that it is not unusual to have the occasional bolt when we're talking about a million bolts to see a few bolts fail during installation because of, the imperfections in the manufacturing process. And so the conclusion was there was no need to fear having anything regarding safety on the bridge as a result of the quality of the bolts, which, to be honest with you, I tend to agree with that. I think there's something else weird going on here that they may not have found. They did some ultrasonic testing of the installed bolts to look for cracks. They also did some dye penetrant inspection of the removed bolts to determine whether or not there was any cracking that they could determine. So, and essentially, they rule out hydrogen embrittlement as a cause. They rule out that there was any chemistry, microstructure, or mechanical property issues from the various lots as a cause. And the final conclusion says, I'm going to read this verbatim. The very low incidence of bolt failure is consistent with an occasional material defect, such as quench cracking or occasional over-tightening during installation, or a combination of factors. To explore these possibilities, it would be useful to produce such failures in the laboratory for comparative purposes. This additional testing would complete the technical analysis, but not necessary to confirm the conclusion that there is little increased concern of additional failures in the field during the lifetime of the bolts. So I'm going to just stop there with that and see if you can add something, or I would love to know how this report really was received and came about. And I'm very curious to know why they would not have checked into the original manufacturer's reports, the job site qualification testing, and maybe took a few more bolts out of the bridge and looked at those.
Well, yeah, you put a lot of things out there, Carmen. The one thing that is, again, I have to say a bit disappointing, is that the conclusions are not really helpful. And I'm fairly certain that with all the information that they generated, there would have been a more definitive conclusion as to what the root cause of the problem is. Whenever bolts break during installation, it's typically a situation of over-tightening. So it's hard for me to say if there's, there are other variables that would have influenced those failures without taking a good close look at the results. But the conclusion leaves one wanting for more information and more guidance, and unfortunately, it's not providing it.
Looking at the conclusion going forward, there are some lessons we can learn from this that the fastener supplier might be able to be aware of. And for me, one of those is, and I've seen this multiple times, I don't know how the bolts were ordered. That's sort of another thing that I would include in a failure investigation is what did the contract require? What was asked for in the RFQ? What was offered? What was delivered? And what finally, in terms of inspection got installed? There's no investigation here over that. So just from a fastener supplier point of view, I always want to caution folks that are in the structural bolting business to not dabble in it and have your ducks in a row. Don't provide a coated high-strength structural bolt without knowing what the requirement is. You kind of have to be a little bit overbearing, or, it's not one of those mind your own business and throw the bolts over the fence and hope they work kind of situations. When it comes to structural bolts, you have to be involved as a supplier, knowing the competency of not just the installers, but also those folks that are specifying and ordering the bolts. Another interesting thing here towards the end, and I just noticed this because I didn't read this before. It says it is believed that the low incidence of bolt failure is likely due to occasional material defect. Occasional over-tightening does not increase the probability of additional failures in the field during the lifetime of the bolts. Typical periodic maintenance inspection should identify any additional bolt breaks, if any, and then what? It doesn't say what to do then. And then it also says this, and this is a true thing that a lot of us, and especially inspectors, don't want to take into consideration, but should. And we should probably change some standards, I think. It says, it is also noted that the redundancy in the bolt connection limits the consequence of any small number of additional breaks over time, if any. So we all know that if there's 1 million bolts in this bridge, if 200,000 of them just instantly disappeared, it probably wouldn't matter. there's a lot of redundancy in bolted connections. It doesn't mean it's okay to use that as a as sort of a tolerance to have product that is not meeting the standard. But I think to some extent it gives the public a sense of safety that an occasional bolt, and when you're talking about 1 million bolts, they're not all going to be perfect, but we shouldn't be seeing, 2 or 3 during the course of a day on the job site breaking.
Yeah, I mean, my initial response to the first reading the conclusion about the failure may have been caused by a quench crack, or manufacturing defect, or over-tightening. Again, that's disappointing to me because each one of those has a different footprint. And so you're telling me that the report hasn't identified any of those, and therefore they're just sort of, shooting from the hip. What is clear to me is that, the authors of the report, or the group of people that were working on this, are not fastener experts. And that's often a criticism that I have when a third-party laboratory does a failure investigation. They're just basically looking at the evidence in front of them, the material in front of them, and not necessarily have the experience or the knowledge to dig further, because ultimately you have to keep asking the whys to get to the root cause of a problem. And when you don't do that, or you don't know where to ask or what type of questions to ask, you're left with a report such as this. And unfortunately, that's disappointing to me.
Well, I expect that this, as a newsworthy item, probably has seen its day. I don't think any more investigation is going to be done. I don't see that anyone is particularly concerned about it. But we'll see. And if it comes up again, it would be interesting for us to talk about. I certainly think there are some really good, important lessons for all of us to learn from that instance. Well, hey, Salim, I can't thank you enough for making time for this Fully Threaded Radio segment. And I'd like to let everyone else know, because many of those listening are members of the NFDA, or the Pacific West Fastener Association, and their conference is coming to beautiful San Diego in March, the 14th and 15th, and you'll be here. So you've met Salim on the radio. If you want to meet him in person, come out to this conference, and Salim's going to be speaking to us about the IFI and some other important resource that you should know about.
I'm very pleased. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed this experience. Hopefully, the listeners out there will have gained some information through the process of listening. Also, regarding the NFDA show, as you mentioned, I will be speaking on the Friday of the show in the morning, and I will be presenting some of the technology tools that the IFI offers. Like the Technology Connection and the online book of standards that we just released, launched, in fact, in the fall. And I will have the great pleasure of being accompanied by my predecessor, Joe Greenslade, who has agreed to come and join us. And so he will join me on the stage. And in particular, regards to the IFI Technology Connection, it was his brainchild, and it's quite a testament to Joe. And so I'm really pleased that he'll be there with me to discuss how he came up with it and what it took for him to actually build it, because he thought it was going to be a lot easier than it actually ended up being. So I'd like to listen to what he has to say, as I'm sure everybody else will.
Well, thank you so much, Salim, and I look forward to seeing you when you come to my beautiful town here.
You're welcome, and have a good evening.
Well, hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the conversation we just had with Dr. Salim Brahimi, the Technical Director of Engineering at the Industrial Fasteners Institute. And I just want to thank him again, and we hope to have him on again because it was a fascinating conversation. Thanks for having us, Eric.
When top quality and outstanding service are at the top of your list in fastener suppliers, turn to Stellfast. Since 1976, Stellfast has grown to become an industry-leading importer and manufacturer of the highest quality industrial fasteners, specialty items, and automotive parts. Our array of facilities across North America and in Asia, along with full quality control labs and ISO 9001-2008 certifications, ensure the highest quality parts, and at Stelfast, they're delivered with undisputed service excellence. We're family-run and dedicated to your success. Our customers have come to depend on the expertise of our staff and the quality of our products. We also offer a wide range of secondary services to meet some of the toughest requirements you might have. Contact Stelfast today through our website at www.stelfast.com and put us to work for you. Stelfast. Service you deserve, people you trust.
Buckeye Fasteners and the Ohio Nut and Bolt Company have been servicing the fastener community since 1905. An employee-owned company for 33 years, we take great pride in the quality of products we sell, offering outstanding customer service from our very knowledgeable sales team members. Our standard product lines include braided weld screws, resistance weld fasteners, leg levelers, tube inserts, clevis pins, and various other fasteners. We have complete custom manufacturing capabilities in low carbon, medium carbon, and stainless steel materials, and our quality systems are registered to ISO standards. We also have an entire team of sourcing specialists able to locate those hard-to-find items with typically smaller minimums and shorter lead times than that of our competition. We offer same-day shipments from one of our warehouses, strategically located throughout the United States and Canada, enabling us to fulfill all your fastener needs in a very timely manner. To find out more about Buckeye Fasteners, please call us at 800-437-1689 or visit us on the web at buckeyefasteners.com. Buckeye Fasteners, product support from development to implementation.
Hey mates, Brian Muscat. Regardless of the required size, material or finish, Eurolink has the European resources to meet your demands for hard-to-find metric fasteners. We're the one-stop source for all of your metric needs, saving you time and money searching for these parts while fulfilling all of your requirements. How do we do it? Eurolink offers access to more than 100,000 quality C-class parts with the ability to solve your toughest metric fastener supply issues every time. Hard-to-find metric fasteners delivered. Just think of us as your heavy metal rock stars. To learn more about how we can rock your world or request a hassle-free quote online, visit eurolinkfss.com. That's eurolinkfss.com.
Hey fastener professionals, one of the most anticipated events in the fastener industry is just around the corner. Make plans today to attend Mack Brooks Fastener Fair USA, which takes place in Detroit May 22nd and 23rd, 2019. Over 300 companies from around the world will exhibit at Fastener Fair USA in 2019, showcasing the latest solutions for key industries like automotive, aerospace, construction, power gen, MRO, and more. In addition to exhibits during 2 full days on the show floor, you'll find plenty of topical information and technical and distribution conference sessions, and networking events, such as the opening night reception. No matter where you fall in the supply chain, Fastener Fair USA is your opportunity to join more than 2,000 manufacturers, suppliers, distributors, and end users in the heart of the Midwest at Detroit's Cobo Center, May 22nd and 23rd, 2019. For more information and to register today, go to www.fastenerfair.com/USA. See you at Mack Brooks Fastener Fair USA.
Hi, this is Vic from the Cambridge Corporation at the 31st Annual Midwest Fastener Show, and I listen to Fully Threaded Radio.
In Chicago, we've got our own little bridge problem here, which would, if Carm and Rob from AIM Test Lab would see it, they would love it, okay? And it's a classic case of two things, but one of them is a polar vortex. When it gets so cold that steel can sort of sometimes pass through its glass transition temperature.
Uh-oh, what happened?
So one of the supports in one of the main bridges over the Chicago River, which was designed by someone who never went to engineering school because they would never, ever design a terrible support system like they did. Okay, where they have a beam like an I-beam like 9 inches or 10 inches thick, and then at one stage they cut it down to half that width so they can support the two bits together. Well, it cracked and a tremendous example of straight brittle fracture, straight out of a sharp corner. I mean, even someone who'd spent half a year in engineering school would never design part of a structure like this.
I wonder if Carm and Salim would go there, because it's not fastener related, but definitely something I'm sure they could comment on. Well, it's also appropriate that we had this breaking story related to something we have on the podcast, because way back during our conversation with Andy Cohn, it was mentioned that Apple is not searching FCH for any screws, but lo and behold, like the day after we put that recording in the can.
Oh, yeah, this is so weird. I mean, we sort of, here it is, of all the things, there's a request from Apple comes through from one of the FCH members to, for a slotted head set screw. having spent all our time saying, Apple would never, ever be looking for this stuff in America. Well, here it is. They were. Okay.
So maybe Tim Cook was listening, Bri.
Maybe.
Well, who knows? Maybe by the next episode, we'll find out.
Right.
But in the meantime, I'd like to thank Carmen Vertullo and Salim Brahimi for their contribution today. I hope you all enjoyed that, folks, and learned a few things. Also, thanks to Andy Cohn from Duncan Bolt for commenting on that LinkedIn post by Mark Shannon from Tower Fasteners. I think we need to have more conversations out on LinkedIn. There's a few people who post serious topics occasionally, and it's not at all like the Twitter conversations that go on. These tend to be much more business oriented. So that was a good launching pad for this conversation. Thanks also to Jessica Boweak from Mac Brooks for her update on what's going on at Fastener Fair USA. Again, that's happening in May, everyone. Get registered if you're not already. And Mike McNulty from Fastener Technology International and Baird analyst Quinn Fredrickson had the FDI numbers on the Fastener News Report today. Good job, gentlemen. And thanks also, Mike, for that amazing second in a row back page report. We're so fortunate to have you out there slugging away for us. What a world it's turning out to be.
And, I want to also say that, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago, Lynn and I were over in San Diego, and on our way over to the hills to Palm Springs, we thought, we can sort of call in and see Carmen and Rob. And so we called in at AIM Test Lab and got really nice cups of coffee and stuff, and taken a tour around the lab, and Rob and Carmen both showed me how their different equipment was working. So we had a great time there, and they then showed us this terrific road that we could take, which Apple Maps did not take me on, incidentally, how we could get over the hills on a really great scenic road to Palm Springs. So it was a great visit there.
They know a lot about fasteners. They know a lot about traveling through California. Good friends to have, Bri.
Yeah, it was good.
The title sponsors of Fully Threaded Radio are Stelfast. For service you deserve and people you trust, it's Stelfast. And Brighton Best International. Tested, tried, and true. Fully Threaded is also sponsored by Buckeye Fasteners, BTM Manufacturing, Eurolink Fastener Supply Service, Fastener Technology International, InSequel Software, Mac Brooks Fastener Fair USA, Andy Industries, Parker Fasteners, The Worth Group, Volt Industrial Plastics, and Solution Industries, home of Milton Mills.
Right.
Looking forward to seeing that new fold-out in Ling Magazine.
Right. Yeah.
What can I say? Get with us anytime, folks. The email address is ftr@fullythreaded.com, and catch us on Twitter where the handle's Fully Threaded. Seeing a little bit more of you out there on Twitter lately too, Bri. What's going on?
Well, I know. See, I do this very, very, very carefully, because I know that if I make a single posting, most people are liable to have serious problem like fall over, or I'm thinking of people's health.
Very considerate of you.
I know. That's why I'm very rarely post. But I just found this article so interesting, and I thought Carm would be interested, because I had this great conversation with Carm about one of my bugbears is these crazy, ANSI standards for materials in America versus the ISO and DIN standards. And we were discussing, the various specifications of nuts and bolts used in the space programs for the different countries around the world. And he reminded me that, it might be that the French design their spacecraft according to ISO standards, but the measurements are inch measurements. They just make bolts that are 25.4 millimeters across, okay?
Oh, see, I thought you were going to say they were those British metric threads again.
No. He said the only people who are really building rockets according to the true all metric specs are the Russians. So that was sort of flattened me a bit because I was so my holier-than-thou attitude about, why they couldn't use metrics for everything since they're building, French build the Ariane space rocket according to the metric standards. He said, nope, no, they don't.
Go figure. During the last episode, you finished off really with sort of a palate cleanser, completely off subject, so we might as well follow suit with another space-related or space exploration-related comment or two. What are your thoughts on the headline that was just announced with Opportunity, the Mars Explorer unit that's been traveling around up there for years and years, finally kind of coughing its little heart out?
Yeah, bit the dust. It's a pity because it was, I followed that really from when it was launched, and people became so familiar with it, they call it OPI, as Opportunity. And it sort of, it was meant to last 3 months. It lasted like 8 years or something like that. And it started wearing out its tracks and all sorts of things were going wrong with it. But it got caught in a terrible sandstorm or a storm, and either it got totally covered up or its solar panels got so covered with dust and stuff that they can't generate any electricity, which is a terrible pity. But it did a great job, okay?
But it wasn't due to bolt failure, right?
No. No, the only thing that was failing on it were the treads on its titanium wheels. They were breaking apart, and so they were working out. And one of its drive motors had broken down, so they'd worked out how to drive it on 5 of its wheels instead of 6.
Where do you read all this stuff?
No, I went to a seminar at a lecture in Chicago here, put on by the guy who was in charge of that project.
Oh, of course.
So he had all the stories about everything, the development of it and everything.
I thought maybe you were hanging out at the JPL again.
No. I wish that'd be my dream in life would be to go there, okay? But he's now the head of the next one going up because he was telling us about the new ones. Next one to go there's going to have a drone on it.
Well, can't wait to hear about that. And I'm sure Fully Threaded listeners are on the edge of the seat for the next episode so that, who knows, maybe you'll disclose a little bit more of your vast knowledge on that subject. But for now, we're going to put this episode of Fully Threaded Radio in the can.
Right.
Thanks for listening, everyone. For Brian Musker, this is Eric Dudas. Get out there, sell some screws, and we'll talk to you next time.
And have a toast to opportunity.
Fully Threaded Radio is a production of Fastener's Clearinghouse. Music provided by Audionautics.
This episode of the Fully Threaded Radio podcast is dedicated to the memory of Jack the Fastener Dog, who will live on through his many unplanned cameo appearances on the show. We'll miss him a lot.
Oops.